Bonjour and welcome back to Bloomera Podcast. I'm your host, Brienne, and today I have a special replay. Despite what your Google calendars may say, it is International Women's Month, and I would like to celebrate it with you. In today's episode, I will offer 7 powerful ways to empower other women and yourself. We're going to talk about why some women struggle to empower other women, how we can fix it, and how we can start to empower other women around us as well as ourselves, because we all know that the real change comes from within. I'm sure you've heard the saying, empowered women empower other women. So by learning how to empower ourselves, we can pour that back into others and help empower them. This episode will be an audio-only version as it is a replay from April 5th of 2022. If you're used to listening to the audio version of my podcast, I do want to remind you that I have a video version over on Spotify and YouTube. The links to both of those will be in the episode description. One of the ways that I am pledging to empower women is through this podcast. I have begun accepting applications for guests on this podcast to be a safe space for women to share their experiences and wisdom. I recently heard a statistic that 51% of podcast listeners are women, but only 22% of podcast hosts are women. These numbers are showing me that we need more space for female and non-binary voices on this platform. One of the ways that you can pledge to empower women is through sharing this podcast and supporting me and my mission to empower others. Hit subscribe, follow me on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and share this with others. The links will all be in my show notes for you to easily find me. And if you are feeling incredibly generous today, consider leaving me a kind review. All of these are wonderful ways to spread the love and empowerment to other amazing humans like yourself. Today's episode is actually inspired by a question that I received after posting a TikTok about how empowered women empower other women. And because I'm not about to take full credit for an idea that someone helped inspire me for, I'd like to give a huge shout out and a lot of credit to Shelly for reaching out and asking me the question. Shelley's question was, how can some women empower other women and some cannot? That is what our episode is about today. It was a great question, and I found that while I could give her a quick answer, I actually couldn't quit thinking about it. I knew that I had to do an entire episode on it. So please send me your questions. I'm happy to answer them for you and will absolutely credit you for inspiring me in any future episodes. I'm looking forward to hearing from you. Now let's get into it. I'm going to be talking about why some women struggle to empower other women, how we can fix this, and how we can start to empower other women. And as you know, I love my journal prompts, so I will make sure to include a link to the journal prompts that correspond with this episode. Make sure that you give yourself some time to reflect on those and join me in lifting up other women. Shelley asks, how can some women empower others and some cannot? The short answer is that empowered women empower other women. For those who are empowering other women, that comes from them feeling whole, empowered, and secure enough in themselves. The more complicated part of this question is actually the latter part, why some women cannot do this. Immediately, a few different answers come to mind for me. The first is that a lot of this behavior might be generational trauma being passed down. I have an earlier episode on generational trauma and how to end it. Check that out for more information. Right now, we are just going to focus on how this impacts one area of our lives as women. We watch how our mothers, grandmothers, aunts, and older sisters interact with the world. This is where we begin to learn these behaviors. The traumas that these women have endured from society, history, or other women are being passed down to us. And a lot of times, we don't question how we are learning to be or act in this world. When you're young, you don't necessarily know to question these things. In one of my absolute favorite books, The 4 Agreements, that I'll be sure to link in my show notes for you, Don Miguel Ruiz talks about how we come into this world agreeing to the things in our lives simply because we don't know any better at the time, or because we haven't gotten a chance to see a different way of living. Sometimes these agreements that we are unconsciously making about how to treat other women come from watching the women around us as we grow up. Although that's not always the case. I don't particularly think that I saw a whole lot of this growing up. My mother was certainly not in the picture and didn't teach me that. This is where the power of media comes in. I remember watching TV shows growing up and seeing the popular girls being absolutely mean to others and only gaining more power and admiration through those behaviors. I'm thinking of Kate and Lizzie McGuire, Regina George in Mean Girls, Blair Waldorf in the original Gossip Girl, Allie from Pretty Little Liars, Cheryl from Riverdale, every villain ever on The Bachelor who got more screen time and attention just for being mean and cruel. These are all shows marketed for young girls and young women who are still very impressionable and easily influenced by messages in the media. It's teaching women from a young age that power is gained by putting others down, not building each other up. The root of the problem for me is society pitting women against each other. Yes, you see that in the media, in all of the movie plots and reality shows of women competing for male attention. You see it in society's standards for women to look and act a certain way, as if there is only one way to be an attractive or powerful female. As if anyone else who is different is less than or inferior to the people who are achieving those almost completely unattainable beauty standards. And consider both past and modern history. Women have always fought for a seat at the table that was not welcoming or creating much space at all for her. Whatever little space women do have at any table of power or leadership is highly competitive to get into, much more so than for men. Coming straight from the Institute of Women's Leadership at Nichols College, globally, women hold just 24% of senior leadership positions. The U.S. lags behind the global average at 21%, compared to China, where women hold about 51% of senior leadership slots. Women represent 45% of the S&P 500 workforce, but only 4% of the CEOs. And in a study of nearly 22,000 publicly traded organizations worldwide, 60% have no female board members. Because men have always had power, preference, and generally just enough of everything, women have always felt a sense of scarcity. I am by no means comparing women to dogs, but just as a reference for the scarcity mindset, consider a dog who lives in the street and doesn't know when its next meal is coming. When it does get food, it gets food aggressive, meaning it's not going to be sharing. Again, I am not comparing women and dogs. I just have a dog. I've spent many years training and understanding how dogs work, and it is the first reference that comes to mind. I grew up seeing and feeling that way in my life too. With this sense of scarcity, women aren't sharing power, status, attention, help, resources, support, or anything really with one another because they fear it will take away from them if another woman gains, when in reality there is more than enough for everyone. Unless it's some rare gem or a limited edition product, there really is enough of anything that you're likely seeking out. There's enough power, enough love, enough money, enough beauty, enough attention, enough of anything that you are likely seeking out. I also think insecurity plays a part in why some women are not empowering other women. If something about the other woman makes them feel insecure, they won't empower them because they already feel like that woman is better in some way. I say this with all of the love and understanding in my heart because as humans, we all experience insecurity in some way, shape, or form. I've certainly felt this way around women who exude things that I feel like I'm lacking in or if I feel triggered by it personally. And I'm sure that this cruelty or bullying that we see from women to other women might sometimes be entirely intentional. Really, I went to both public and private high schools. I've seen this intentional bullying myself. But I'd like to think that a lot of what we see is not intended to hurt the other person so much as trying to heal or cover up something in the person doing the hurting. Hurt people hurt people. And I'm going to quote the 4 agreements again. Seriously, you need to read this if you haven't. It's in my show notes for you. Don Miguel Ruiz says, Nothing other people do is because of you. It is because of themselves. These hurt people are just projecting their hurt and insecurities onto the women that they are trying to bring down, in the hopes that this will make them somehow feel better or have some sense of perceived power, or just to project an image of someone who is powerful. And I'd bet money that at some point in our lives, we've all been guilty of not empowering other women, or at least considering it. I have had my moments in the past and still catch myself occasionally thinking petty things that I can do or say, though I am much more self-aware now and can recognize my unhealthy motives behind these things. It's really hard to admit and talk about, especially because the girl in my past who wasn't empowering other women was recovering or suffering from some kind of abuse. I'm telling you this to acknowledge that it's normal to have these moments. All of those feelings are valid. It's what you do with them that matters. So what can we do with those feelings, those ingrained beliefs, those learned behaviors? How can we fix this and begin to empower other women like the empowered women we know we can be? I have 3 simple yet intentional steps to help you start rooting in self-compassion and rising into empowerment on your own, because that change begins within ourselves. Steps 1 and 2 will be talked about together because they absolutely go hand in hand. We are going to be checking in with ourselves and helping ourselves get unstuck in some of the ways that are keeping us from feeling empowered within ourselves. I'll describe what both of these mean and apply them to real-world experiences. It's really challenging for me to just list issues without offering solutions or comfort along with them, which is why they're going hand in hand. Step number 1, check in with ourselves. This is where my journal prompts will really come in handy. For the sake of easy listening, I'm not going to be listing off all of those questions. These are ones that you are really going to need to focus on and contemplate, not just hear and move forward without giving them the time that they deserve. The journal prompts are linked in my show notes for you and completely free. We are checking in with ourselves to find those blockages, those roadblocks that are keeping you from living and being your most empowered self. If you aren't empowered, there is something within you that is holding you back. And you will never be able to empower someone else if you are not feeling empowered within yourself. And step number 2, we are helping ourselves. We are going to find the ways to help ourselves through or around these roadblocks. And we are going to have compassion for ourselves along the way. It's not easy to acknowledge our faults or struggles, and it's certainly not easy to make the changes necessary to improve those areas of ourselves that we might not already like. But you are not alone in this journey. Let's apply some real-world experiences to those 2 steps and see how we can begin to empower ourselves. The first real-world experience is a lack of power. Is there somewhere in your life that you feel a lack of power? Maybe this is in a relationship, at work, in parenting, with family, friends, or even just within yourself. Consider situations where you might be saying things like, "That's just the way it is. That's just how they are. That's just the way I am." Or, "There's nothing I can do about it." Sure, we cannot control other people. We cannot control life. But what we can control is how we allow it to impact us and how we respond to it. With other people being just the way they are, we can choose what behavior we accept from them or don't accept. We can set boundaries and new expectations for how we are treated. In those situations we don't feel like we can do anything about, we can choose to find another way to get what we want, or a similar alternative to what we want. Or we can choose to accept what is, cope, and move forward for ourselves to gain back our own power. The next experience is that scarcity mindset. Is there something that you feel threatened by or admire about in another woman? How can you maybe learn that from them? They might be flattered that you've asked and are completely happy to help. And if you feel uncomfortable asking or talking to them about it, how can you channel this energy into your own life? Please keep in mind that this is not meant to be about unhealthy body or beauty standards, toxic relationship dynamics, or aiming to be better than someone else. We are aiming to empower ourselves in a way that does not hurt another or that could possibly hurt our own physical or mental health. Now let's talk triggers. This is a very vulnerable topic, so I'm going to get vulnerable with and for you. I find myself getting triggered by women who are dressing or acting in a way that I perceive as overly sexual. And I'm not proud of this. Really, I claim to be a feminist and all about empowering women, and yet I struggle to empower them in their sexuality. It wasn't until I discovered that I was triggered by it, and why, that I understood it wasn't about them. It was always about me. You know, the classic, "It's not you, it's me" line. But it really was. Due to my past sexual abuse that I have shared in previous episodes, I was only seen as a sexual object. And I fear that is how women are all viewed. So when I see someone doing or wearing something that I personally feel would be sexualized, I'm triggered. Logically, I recognize that what women wear or do is not grounds for consent or even really asking for males' attention or gaze. Women can wear or do what they want because they feel safe, comfortable, and empowered in their own sexuality. Whereas I feel triggered, fearful, and hurt. They are not wrong. And I am still healing from these traumas. But now I can do it without criticizing other women, even if it was just in my own head. If you are finding yourself triggered in any situation, please go listen to my episode on how to cope with triggers and go through all of those free journal prompts for triggers on my website. They have been a lifesaver for me. The next real-world experience is envy, jealousy, and/or competition. Some might argue that this all really fits into the scarcity mindset example that I explained earlier, and mostly I agree. But I do believe that it deserves its own category for the small ways that it can feel or look different. To me, envy, jealousy, and competition come more from a place of wanting to be better or have more than someone else, and not just solely from a place of wanting more for yourself, like with the scarcity mindset. Consider the envy that you might feel if someone fits a beauty standard that you feel that you don't meet, or has a relationship dynamic that you wish you could have. Maybe you are jealous of how much they have achieved or how much attention that they seem to get. Or maybe you feel like you're competing with this person, whether that is for a real or a fictional goal, like a job position versus trying to seem like a better mother. First, I want to ask you how healthy these feelings are. Yes, they are absolutely valid, but are they healthy? Are you striving for something that is attainable for you? Or a beauty standard that is just made up and does not align with the beautiful being that you are? And consider whether or not you are seeing the full reality. It's so easy to look at someone else's life, relationships, or success and only see the highlight reels, especially if most of what you see is on social media or a superficial level. If you understood the intricacies of that thing, you might be able to see the struggles or flaws that surely exist. And as for the competition, is this real or is it perceived? If it is real, how can you find enough value and pride within yourself to not be impacted by the outcome? If you are competing for an image, like to be the perfect mom, best in your field, or anything related to body image, that is perceived. Acknowledge that. Explore that. We are all uniquely made, uniquely great, and uniquely flawed. Perfect does not exist. Knowing that, we would likely start aiming to just be good enough. And there is space for all to be good enough in our own unique ways. I feel like that's enough of those real-world experiences. Let's get on to step number 3, empowering ourselves. So let's empower ourselves to feel proud of our individuality and not feel threatened by any other women succeeding, being beautiful, or having anything else that you desire for yourself. One of the ways that we can start to empower ourselves is through practicing self-care. There is a real power into tuning into ourselves to discover our needs. Those needs are always evolving, and being able to identify what your need is right now is a form of self-acknowledgement. It's meeting yourself where you are at right now and being able to fulfill those needs for yourself. It can be a challenging practice to start, especially if we are so used to putting other people's needs before our own. I really struggled with this after being in an abusive relationship and again once I became a mother. But turning back to myself and making myself a priority again was incredibly empowering. I have a list of self-care ideas and activities for you on my website for you to look over. It's a way for you to start discovering and meeting those needs for yourself. It's linked in my show notes for you. You deserve that extra TLC. Another way we can start empowering ourselves is through practicing self-love. Self-love is much different than self-care. It took me a few years to fully understand that difference. Caring for yourself is a form of love, but the act of loving yourself is something so much deeper than just meeting your needs. It's about treating yourself with compassion, gentleness, and love, just like you would treat a loved one or a close friend. Think about how you speak to a loved one versus how you speak to yourself. We are all our own toughest critics, right? But if you wouldn't speak to someone that you love like that, you should not be speaking to yourself like that because you love yourself. Or at least that's what we are aiming for. Catch yourself when you are being mean to yourself and find ways to use more positive language. I talked about this in my episode on body acceptance during pregnancy. My friend Dusty helped me to reframe my body image struggles during pregnancy to no longer say that my belly was big or huge and to start saying it was a healthy belly because it really was healthy for my belly to grow. Finding little ways to be gentle and more compassionate with ourselves through language can really begin to improve our relationship with ourselves. And along those same lines, compliment yourself daily. Every time you see a mirror, give yourself a compliment. This can be a physical compliment, such as, "I love my eyes," or "My hair looks really great today." But I encourage you to dive deeper than that. Compliment your work ethic, the value you offer to others, or another trait that you love about yourself. Focus more on the amazing things that you offer to the world and less on how you show up in the world, although that's still okay from time to time. If you find yourself struggling to compliment yourself every time you see a mirror, or you're avoiding those mirrors altogether like I did after giving birth to my first baby, consider a gratitude practice. I have an episode on my daily gratitude practice that includes giving yourself 3 compliments each day. If that's the only time that you compliment yourself, that's still likely more than you're doing now. And I'll take that as a win. Another way you can empower yourself is by using your voice. Speak up. The act of finding your voice can be incredibly challenging, especially if you have endured some trauma in your life. And the act of using your voice can be even more challenging. But we love a good challenge, right? It helps to build our confidence and shows us how capable we are. Even if you start all alone, even if you start with a whisper, even if your voice shakes, start speaking up. It's a practice, a muscle that we need to strengthen with routine and intentional effort. When I think about this, I immediately think about the game Sims. Do you remember that? And how the little Sims character gains points in charisma by speaking to themselves in the mirror. It feels silly at first, but a lot of people actually do this before giving speeches or speaking in public. I mean, hey, don't knock it till you try it. Another uncomfortable practice in empowerment, if you have consistently put others' needs before your own, is setting boundaries. But you deserve to have boundaries. Boundaries can be incredibly healthy, both for us and our own mental health, and for others and our relationship with them. So whether this boundary is with someone else, with your work hours, or with yourself, Set a boundary where you feel you are lacking in one. The act of identifying where you need a boundary, acknowledging that you deserve that boundary, and setting the boundary is empowering within itself. By not having boundaries, you are handing over your power to others. You are allowing others' needs to come before your own. But in putting yourself first and setting appropriate boundaries, you are taking your power back. And notice I said your power. Boundaries are set in place for you and not to take away or manipulate another person or their power. Another amazing way to empower yourself is by setting realistic goals for yourself. Ones that you can easily achieve each day or each week. With every goal that you achieve, your pride and sense of accomplishment rises. You begin to see what you are capable of, and you build your confidence up. I shared actionable steps that you can take for small and large goals in my episode on continued personal growth and New Year's resolutions. Even if you are nowhere near the new year when you're listening to this, go check it out because it's about goals that you set throughout the year, adapting with you as you evolve, and the steps that you can take to make them happen, small or large. The next thing that you can do to empower yourself is to find your passion or joy in life. The more that you live in your passion or joy, the more fulfilled you will feel. Consider the person that you want to be. I have journal prompts on my website for self-discovery that I will link in my show notes for you to dive deeper into this. But ask yourself, what would you do as that person you want to be? How would you show up in the world? Now start taking steps each day to be that person. I have an entire episode on how to help you follow your dreams. I don't want to shift the focus of this episode, so go check that one out after this. And celebrate yourself. Be your biggest fan. Cheer yourself on as you accomplish goals and celebrate every single win, no matter how small it is. Got out of bed on a day that you felt depressed? Celebrate it. Had a difficult conversation that you wanted to avoid but knew needed to happen? Celebrate it. Remembered to take your medicine or water the plants? Celebrate it. Those are all just as worthy of celebration as bigger accomplishments. And the last thing that you can do to empower yourself is to worry about yourself. You know you are doing all of these empowerment steps right when you are so focused on yourself that you don't have time to spend picking apart other women or trying to bring them down, because you are directing that energy towards building yourself up. All of this effort is filling your own empowerment cup, which can then finally start to pour over into building other women up. So how can we start to empower other women when that time comes? Or even as we are still learning to empower ourselves? The first way you can do this is by looking for the good in others. Once we start feeling more empowered ourselves, it's much more comfortable to look for the good in other women. We are no longer threatened by it, and we don't feel less than for them having something that we perceive as good. Looking for the good in others is a wonderful place to start empowering others, but we also need to act on that. We can do that by simply acknowledging other women. Most people want to be acknowledged. Even if it's not in some loud or grand way, it's nice to have someone recognize the effort that we've put into anything. Our outfits, our work, our parenting, or our homes. If you notice something that you like or admire about another woman, whether it's their outfit, their energy, or something that they've said, acknowledge it. I compliment strangers all of the time. If I notice something about them that I like or admire, I'm absolutely telling them. Not only does this put more good into the world, but a lot of times it actually opens up a conversation and can lead to a moment of bonding. Just warm, fuzzy feelings all the way around. And offer your support. Be generous with other women. Share resources, contacts, information, tips, advice, or wisdom. Help build them up and lift them a little higher in life. Another woman's success is not your failure. You probably want that same level of support in life, right? For someone to come and offer you a leg up where you are trying to go. Be that for someone else. Karma will absolutely come back around and help you out. I can promise you that. Another way to empower other women is to stand up for them. Speak up when you see women being mistreated. Give them space to have a voice. Protect them and their mental health. A lot of times, women feel scared to speak up for themselves. Of course, this is not all women, but a lot of them do in certain circumstances. Maybe they don't feel safe speaking up. Or maybe they've gotten so used to being ignored, trampled over, or have low enough self-worth that they don't feel they deserve to have a voice. Encourage their voice and stand up for them when needed. You can also empower women by helping them up when they fall down. When you see another woman fall or fail, help them. Don't sit there in amusement or be glad that you're not the one suffering. When one woman falls, we all fall. Help her get back up. Offer her assistance. Comfort her. You don't need to be besties with her to respect her and offer assistance in a time of need. My last tip on how to start empowering other women is to celebrate their success. Be happy for their wins. When another woman wins, we all win. Again, another woman's success is not your failure. There is enough success, love, money, power for all of us. To quote our queen, T. Swift, we all know now we've all got crowns. You get a crown, I get a crown, we all get crowns. Let's make a promise moving forward to start empowering one another. Let's lift other women up and stop tearing them down. What can you do today to empower someone else? Even if it's just starting with my journal prompts for empowering yourself, that's a wonderful start. Head to my website or any of the other episodes that I mentioned to keep growing within yourself. That's where true empowerment begins. As a reminder, one of the ways that you can empower women right now is by subscribing to this podcast and following me on Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook. Those links are all in my show notes for you. And consider leaving me a loving review for other women to find and begin their journey of empowerment and healing. Don't forget to send any questions that you have over to me. You might just end up inspiring a podcast like this one. Thank you again for being here with me for another episode of the Bloomera podcast. I'll see you in the next episode.